Good morning. Welcome to City and State's latest legislative forum on the biggest issues affecting seniors. This time we're heading down to Brooklyn. We got a great lineup of state legislators, members of the Assembly and the State Senate. I'm Zach Williams, staff writer at City and State. Super excited for this event as a longtime resident of Brooklyn myself. I'll admit a little bit of a bias to Kings County. Don't tell anyone, but so much is going on, and I think Brooklyn is a really good place to examine them. Of course, the pandemic, the state budget just got passed, and of course, the economic reopening is really just getting started and will probably continue for years and years. But before we jump into the conversation, I have to thank our wonderful sponsor, AARP, for helping us put on this event. In lieu of audience applause, I'll just give a little clap from my chair here. And let's jump right into it. We're gonna, like I said, we got some a great group of legislators here. We're gonna try to make some time for audience questions. You can drop them in the Q&A box, which if your Zoom is like mine, is probably right at the bottom, and we'll try to get them into the conversation. So let's introduce each legislator. Please give a wave just so everyone in the audience knows who we're talking about. First up, we got Senator Roxanne Persaud of District 19. We have Senator Kevin Parker of District 21. Assemblymember Rodneyse Bichotte Hermelyn of District 42. Assemblymember Maritza Davila of District 53. Assemblymember Emily Gallagher of District 50. And Assemblymember Latrice Walker and Assemblymember Robert Carroll ought to be joining us momentarily, along with State Senator Gounardes. So let's jump right into it. You know, the state budget passed just a couple weeks ago. We got a little over a month left until the legislative session ends for the year. Let's just kind of start off with the big highlights of the budget and how it affects seniors. Broadband is one issue that comes to mind that's hugely important for seniors and everyone else for that matter. Who can kind of tell me a little bit about what's happening on that front?
Well, I guess as the chair of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee and the person who actually negotiated the provision in the budget, we should talk about, the fact that, we're at a place in time where internet access has become as important as water, gas, and electricity. In the same way that we would not put money in an apartment or house without water, gas, or electricity. Internet has now become kind of the fourth utility. And so we've kind of represented that in our values in the context of the budget by passing a $15 a month, for low income and moderate income families, a program that provides some access to affordable broadband. When we talk about access to the internet, is really kind of the digital divide is really kind of three sections, right? There's a hardware piece that's part of it. There is a affordability adoption piece, which we address in the budget, but then there's also a build out piece in the rest of the state. So in New York City is less important, although there are some places, particularly in Roxanne's district, where that are not built out as well as they could be. And so we're still addressing that. And we actually address that in the budget as well by doing a mapping study that the Public Service Commission will be implementing very shortly. And so we got those first two pieces done, but we still really need to look at the issue of devices, particularly for our students who are being pushed into distance learning and hybrid learning, and oftentimes are doing their homework on cell phones. And so there's still some ways to do, but we have taken some significant steps this session.
Now, I should introduce State Senator Andrew Gounardes just joined us. And of course, shame on me, I neglected to plug Kevin Jones, Associate State Director Advocacy at AARP New York.
Zach?
AARP was certainly a huge booster of broadband. Kevin, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about how, kind of that last mile, if you will, between the connections that people have in the neighborhoods and actually getting people connected. This PSC study seems hugely important to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, I want to thank Senator Parker for all of his work in just bringing this issue to the forefront and really highlighting the disparity that we see all around the state. Senator Parker is also my state senator, so I live in his district, and I can tell you for sure that when I moved here, there was a disparity just among folks in my own neighborhood, and the way that they put in the lines, like they put them on my street, but they did not put them down, down the block, just a few blocks down the road. So this has been a problem for a long time, and AARP has been very supportive of the mapping provision, because we know that even though the governor's office was saying that there's 98% coverage, the truth on the ground is that just wasn't the case. And I think that, like many things during the pandemic, what we've seen is that when everything moved to virtual, you really did see whose broadband or high-speed internet was functional and whose wasn't. Because I can tell you, before mine was upgraded, I would not have been able to be on any kind of video call like this at all. And that would have made, just making a living for the last year very difficult. And then you add on top of that, you have folks that are trying to sign up for vaccine appointments or trying to access city or state services, whether it's unemployment or, just trying to fight isolation, because we know that isolation over the long term can be as detrimental to your physical health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So this touches so many different areas of our lives, and there was a mad rush to kind of fix a lot of the immediate problems, with the city gave out some tablets and things like that, and we applaud all of that. But the bill to map where service is and isn't is really crucial in making sure that we're prepared if, God forbid, something happens where we have to lock down again, to make sure people can access services and stay in touch, keep working, keep learning, and keep thriving.
I want to welcome Assemblymember Latrice Walker to the discussion. Thank you for joining us. And it looks like her colleague, Assemblymember Bichotte Hermelyn, has something to say about broadband.
Yes, thank you so much. First, I want to thank City and State and AARP for putting this forum together. As a former telecom engineer who actually worked on the telecom 5 ESS switches and deployed voice over IP, and worked on fiber to the curb and fiber to the home, I understand this. I understand the issues. I understand the challenges in building out. We have worked with Communications Workers for America, who's been actually lobbying and fighting a lot of the providers, because they just feel that it's just way too expensive to lay out like the fiber and the fiber in the ground. And so, their way of doing it is just kind of, putting it via the antenna and so forth. And so there's a lot of people in our neighborhoods who were just opposed to that. I wanted to mention that Senator Parker, that you heard from, who's been a leading force in the broadband area, we actually have a bill together that would increase, it's called the broadband bill, by the way. It would increase competition between broadband providers through the development of a franchise system. And the way it works is that a lack of competition provides residents with only one choice, as you know. Lots of people are calling our offices, hey, we only have one choice, we don't have access to broadband, high speed, and so forth. So the city is currently only authorizing to collect revenue on cable television from rights of the way that also deliver broadband, and consumers that are increasingly abandoning traditional television services and are acquiring entertainment content via streaming by broadband service. So as such, cable franchise revenue is likely to dramatically decrease over the next several years, while broadband use will increase. And this bill would authorize broadband franchises in New York City. This will increase the competition and ultimately provide New Yorkers with more affordable broadband options. And it's very similar to what happened with the telecom industry when the mama telecoms had to lease their lines. It was part of, it was a law, it was FCC ordered to lease the line so that we can increase competition. This is very similar. We want to increase competition. That way, people in our neighborhood can have a choice, and these broadband service providers will have no other choice but to provide service that are duly needed in our community.
Senator Persaud, what do you think?
Quickly, first I want to thank AARP and City and State for hosting us. But in terms of broadband, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us what how ill prepared we were to service our seniors. we were telling seniors that they needed to use technology to access services, but we weren't giving them the technology. There are technology droughts within my district. As you know, it's a vast number of seniors who are still suffering. You know, we're offering them devices, but they cannot use that device to connect to the services because there is no broadband technology. Broadband, we are living in a broadband drought. You know, as Assemblymember Bichotte Hermelyn said, they're offering to place the antennas, and there are people in the community who are saying no, because of the information that's out there that tells them that the antennas are detrimental to their health. So when we're talking about broadband and bringing it into our communities, especially in our where our seniors are populated, we have to make sure we're having a conversation about the health aspect, because they're also afraid of what broadband can do to them. So we may be offering the service, but then they're not going to take it because they're saying it's going to kill me. So we have to have a combined conversation. So again, you know, it's an ongoing thing. And also within our school population, we offer the kids all of these devices, but they can't access the services. So broadband technology is desperately needed across the state, not just New York City, but across the state.
Telehealth immediately comes to mind, something that really exemplifies that. Let's turn to our resident history buff, State Senator Gounardes. You know, tell me a little bit more. You know, the state budget was huge. You know, the biggest one in state history. Obviously, we've gone through one heck of an epic year. When it comes to telehealth, how does it fit into the mix?
So, you know, and it's a great segue from what we were just talking about and thinking about how important technology is to our day-to-day functioning, and especially for you know, individuals who might not be able to access something as important as like health services. And you know, we have taken a bunch of steps throughout this entire year in this session to kind of promote and enhance access to telehealth services. There was funding set aside in the budget to kind of promote and be able to create the linkages between patients and you know, the appropriate providers that are situated in position to be able to offer appropriate and safe telehealth care. You know, it's not as simple as just calling up your doctor and saying, you know, I have a headache, or I have this, I have that, what do I do? It really is about utilizing new technologies and the ability to kind of use the internet as a way to really do appropriate diagnoses, to really get to the nitty gritty. You see a lot of this happening, especially in the mental health space, which is critically important. And, you know, one of the things that has happened over the last year has been just a real stress placed on our mental health service providers. We've all been going through a lot, especially individuals who maybe have been alone for the last year, have not been able to socialize at senior centers, go visit their families, go visit their grandkids. That adds a lot of mental toll, stress on individuals, especially our senior population. So to be able to expand access to these kind of pioneering new medical services as part of the state budget, as part of the investments we've made in the state budget, I think were really critical and really important. And you know, that kind of fits into a broader theme, which you kind of alluded to. This is a very big budget, but this is a down payment on investments that we should have been making for the last several years. And unfortunately, it took a pandemic of this magnitude and a crisis of this magnitude to recognize the shortfalls and recognize where we were not meeting the mark, and then using this budget as an opportunity to kind of jumpstart or kind of, you know, catch up to where we should have been all along.
Now, one area of the borough that's undergoing lots of change is North Brooklyn. Let's get our legislators from that area into the conversation. How is this all playing out in neighborhoods like Greenpoint and Bushwick and North Brooklyn at large?
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me into this very important conversation, city and state and AARP, which, by the way, I have my AARP card already, and I'm sure some of us do too. But you know, in my district, we have over 8 senior centers in which the seniors congregate, or used to congregate before the pandemic. And I have to tell you that one of the biggest problems were was getting them to access any type of services. People were afraid to go into their buildings, and we have about 10 senior buildings in which they also live. It was very difficult to get senior services like Meals on Wheels. There was no communication. And how we did that was by knocking on doors. However, our senior centers were already teaching our seniors how to do the basics with computers, but they have no service. They don't even understand what that means, how to go to a normal company, a broadband company, and say, I want to get, broadband services to be able to do my daily, stuff, to talk to my grandchildren, to do. So there was a lot of depression. I want to thank Senator Parker for his legislation. I think it's amazing. And I think that this was a rude awakening for all of us. The COVID-19 was something that, broadband became very prevalent. It became almost an emergency necessity in all of our districts. And seniors were the ones paying the price. And I'll give you another example. People were dying in our hospitals. We could not get apparatuses so they can say goodbye to their families, or their families could see them. It's just something that it's extremely important. We need it. I am so happy to be able to support this piece of legislation. And as I believe Senator Persaud was saying, the homeless shelters, family shelters, parents that could not get service. Yes, they have the computers, the schools gave them up, but they couldn't get their kids signed up to classes. These are children that are going to be backed up for an entire year that we're going to have to eventually help catch up, right? How do we do that when the parents themselves do not know how to get onto a computer or do not have the means to purchase broadband? So, this is how it looks like in the street when you go to visit the normal, person that does not have the money to spend $200 a month to get services, broadband services. So once again, I want to thank you, Senator Persaud, for, bringing this legislation to, I think $15 is better than having nothing at all. So thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Assemblymember Gallagher. I'm up in District 50, right next to Assemblymember Davila. And I would say that what we really saw from COVID was how the invisibility problem that we experienced with the needs of seniors really was exacerbated when we were trying to figure out how to get the services that seniors needed. For my district and for my district office, two of the big emergencies that we were facing was access, of course, to the vaccines for seniors, because one of the issues is when we're using data about income, District 50's income data is very high, but we also have enormous income inequality in the district. So it was making invisible the great number of seniors and other folks who actually deeply needed access to services that were not being provided. So we were able to work with the mayor's office and show them a deeper dive on the data and say, like, we actually have a lot of people who need better access here that are being ignored because of the zip code data. So getting access for seniors, especially our NYCHA seniors who also were having trouble getting food. A lot of the food distribution sites were that had been operating in NYCHA because of conditions in some of the buildings were not able to continue there because of social distancing. So working to make sure that people were still getting access to those services. And as Assemblymember Davila was saying, those senior center sites also had a lot of the access to the internet and access to computers and training and that. So there was a real urgency in making sure that our senior population was not forgotten and not ignored in this moment. And I think one of the biggest wins of the budget was more money for home health care, which I think really provides so much support, especially for our seniors who need to be in their community because of language or culture, that they need to be at home so that they can still have the care that they need in regards to language access. And I think one thing that we need to still do is make sure that home health care workers are getting their needs met. There's still a 24-hour workday that is happening for many home health care workers that I have as a priority to make sure that we're protecting them. And we were able to get some protections put in place for home health care. But I think that is something that we really need to be looking more deeply into, especially after seeing the dismay and the death and the disaster of our nursing home industry during COVID. So I took it a little off broadband topic, but hopefully it was all right.
I see the A word coming up, affordability.
Yes.
Kings County, Brooklyn, it's a place of many riches, but there's a lot of people struggling too. And I can think of so many ways: housing, medical costs, prescription drugs. Assemblymember Walker, maybe you could tell me a little bit about what are the biggest issues when it comes to affordability for your constituents, senior constituents, I should add.
Well, hi. I have the awesome opportunity to represent the communities of Brownsville, Ocean Hill, East Flatbush, Crown Heights, Cypress Hills, and East New York. And, my district is, of course, plagued by abject poverty. And so when it comes to affordability, I'll say that, all across the board, we face these issues. I know initially we're talking about, broadband and access to broadband, and that sort of being the pipeline for access to so many things, right? So affordable housing, you got to go onto housingconnect.com in order to get access to affordable housing. And if you don't have broadband, how are you going to do that? Prescription drugs and affordable, healthcare and telehealth and access to healthy options. If you don't have broadband, you don't have the ability to be able to participate in that industry as well. And in my district, we still have we still have copper wires as our infrastructure. So even to the extent that you're paying for broadband or you're paying for wireless services, the quality of the service just isn't good enough, right? And so, I have a kid, my daughter is 9 years old. We're on remote learning each and every day, but it doesn't mean that, even though I have Verizon Wireless for her through our cell phones, which is incredibly expensive, but, at least I try to do that to give her a modicum of stability, but that's unstable. Even when I'm on session, sometimes I have to turn my camera off just so that my system doesn't fall while I'm trying to do the people's business. And so everything really just sort of ties into one another. However, we have made astronomical changes with respect to this budget. Of course, Vital Brooklyn, in terms of getting shovel-ready projects into the ground with respect to building out affordable housing. We just passed, well, not just passed, but we're etching forward on the Brownsville plan, where we have development sites that are happening along Livonia Avenue. In fact, there's a senior development site which will be taking place along Chester and Livonia Avenue. And then, of course, many of the issues that my grandmothers, I call them gamma, because a lot of us as parents, we have to rely on our parents to help us raise our children. And so gamma, we have a whole gamma group, is GAMA, grandmothers who are mothers again. And so all of the same issues, that we deal with and we face as parents, as, middle-aged folk, as millennials, they're facing a lot of the same things because they're going through these same circumstances as well. Of course, food. right? Every now and then we turn on the TV. One of the calls that I get from many of our seniors, oh, chicken is about to go up, right? And so a lot of times just, having to make decisions in terms of whether or not to buy their prescription drugs or whether or not to go to the supermarket becomes a thing. And then many times, even with the city, they wanted many of our seniors to go online to a database to put in their information to figure out if they're going to get food service deliveries coming to their home. So again, behind the line. And if you don't have telephone access, and then many of our seniors were in our homes, so we had to sort of change and shift our gears and go back to old school. We did door knocking. We were signing seniors and through the doors, right? Because they didn't want to open the door. And so the dynamics that we had to go through, of course, as legislators, as advocates, as organizers, really, gave us, it sort of stripped us back into our purest form. But we did everything that we had to do in order to make things possible. Of course, it was great with the eviction moratoriums to make sure that any of our seniors who were going through a process of eviction, that they would be subsidized. Our seniors who were going through a great deal of struggle with paying their mortgages. And now we did what we could do with the court system to be able to stop the foreclosure actions from moving forward. And so I know that we have a lot of work to do, but of course, I am honored to be able to be in this position. I'm raising my mom again, I feel like, right? Because as they say, once an adult, twice a child. And my mom and Niall are both, equally like pulling at me. And so I love it. And most of the seniors, they call me up too. And we wound up doing some crazy things, but I couldn't find myself doing anything else.
We actually have one of our first audience questions, which is, where is Mitchell-Lama and all rent stabilized / rent controlled housing in New York City now standing? Are there plans for growth or discussion of any new programs in the pipeline?
Well, I'll say that I think I even, I take a lot of pride in saying that Mitchell-Lama, like my district is the Lama. And we had this development called Atlantic Towers. And Atlantic Towers came out of the Mitchell-Lama program. And New York City has started this other program called Article 11. And you don't get the same protections as a Mitchell-Lama style program, because now you leave the program, but you're into the HCR regulations. I think that after, last year, the year before last, when we did a lot of the rent regulations, we really solidified a lot of the protections and made those protections even stronger. But I don't see a new Mitchell-Lama on the horizon. However, we do need to invest in more workforce housing. A lot of people are out here making just enough money to be broke, and they can't gain access to a lot of the low-income housing. And so Mitchell-Lama housing was definitely a huge plus in many communities, and I hope to see a lot more be built, or we restructure the program.
Can I just say a couple of words on behalf of Mitchell-Lama? So I sit on the task force in Albany. There was a task force that was developed approximately about a year ago. And that task force is headed by the chair of the Housing Committee, Steve Simblewitz. In my district, we have what is called Lindsay Park. It is 7 buildings, 22 floors each, Mitchell-Lamas. I believe that what we are working on right now is to continue to help them still stay affordable. As you are aware, Williamsburg has boomed into something that people can't afford anymore. But this wonderful city in the middle of Williamsburg is thriving. It's beautiful buildings. However, the way that HPD and HCR has been working with them is just to build more transparency when it comes to the board, and to be able to continue to keep those apartments affordable. And not to mention, many seniors live in these Mitchell-Lamas. They are seniors that were at one point teachers, they were conductors, and this is where they went to retire. They bought their little piece of, heaven in the middle Williamsburg, and this is where they're happy. But the challenge has been the affordability and trying to keep big developers from coming in and building these towering buildings that may make their apartments sort of speak not affordable anymore. So we are working diligently to ensure that all of these apartments stay affordable. We've gotten the weatherization program in there, which is a state program that was done several years ago, new windows. And now this Michelama is over 40 years old or 50 years old. So their boilers and everything else has become deteriorated. So right now we are working very hard to ensure that that the seniors stay in these buildings and that it continues to be affordable to them.
So an audience member just asked, how do elderly people with intellectual or developmental disabilities fit into some of these issues that we're talking about? How do we accommodate them?
I've worked in the housing business for 30 years of my life. And I can tell you what I do in my office when a constituent comes in and says, I'm homeless, I have nowhere to live. What we do is we have a list of all of the housing developments and we apply for each housing development. So not one senior comes into my office without filling out at least 10 applications. 10 applications to all of the entire, we let them know you may not be able to stay in Bushwick, but we probably can help you fill out these applications so that eventually you can get into one of these buildings. It's sad to say that with the pandemic, we have lost so many seniors because their underlying conditions and because their immune system. So that has left a lot of vacancies, and that's unfortunate. But we're doing everything that we can in our power to ensure not only seniors from my district, but we take seniors from every other district that comes into my office. We have a robust constituent service team that does this work. And I encourage, if you know someone, just tell them to give us a call. We set up appointments and we get it done for them.
I just want to mention one other thing that AARP is very supportive of that we think will can help with housing for folks, and that's accessory dwelling units, which are the secondary homes located on the property of a primary dwelling. Obviously, in areas like Brooklyn, this is a little more complicated because people don't have yards as often as they do outside of the city. But in the accessory dwelling unit legislation that we're supportive of, which is Senator Hartman's bill, Senate 4547, and the Assembly, it's Assemblymember Epstein 4854. It would basically require municipalities to allow these structures and set standards for them. And these are really good options for folks that are able to live independently, want to stay in their communities, but maybe they need somebody nearby, very close by, family member, things like that. So we think this is just another step that could really help, both on the housing front, but also for folks that want to stay in their community that don't need full-time care, but might need somebody to check in on them or somebody, related that's close by.
Well, if I can add to your point, one of the things that I find with respect to accessibility, so I represent 29 NYCHA developments. And, one of the things that we've seen, just, like Michelama, many of our NYCHA developments have been around for 50 years. And some of our seniors have been in their apartments, right, for 50 years. And some of them are on the 15th floor, 13th floor. Again, we talk about broadband, access to energy infrastructure. And a lot of times we would see like the elevators go out in some of our NYCHA developments. The elevators are not going out because they're broken sometimes. They're going out because communities like mine are almost near brownouts when the peak access to energy is high. And so Con Edison has to turn the energy down. And when that happens, it affects the elevators, the movement of the elevators. And so many seniors have to climb up all of these stairs, et cetera, et cetera. And so they would come into the office because they want to get moved to lower floors within NYCHA developments. And so if I could, I would love to be able to partner with AARP to get, on the advocacy side, to be able to say to NYCHA and also to a lot of the other landlords, whether they be the affordable housing landlords or Mitchell Lama or whatever the circumstances are, to be able to have some support to say, we need these seniors to come down to these lower floors because accessibility is a huge issue. Now, in addition to that, I have a number of veterans in my district, and we've been looking for ramps, trying to get egress in order to put lift ramps on homes. And because homes are attached, many of the lift ramps have to go like on the back, and then they have to like break open walls and all sorts of crazy things. And so we do need a lot of support too, in terms of getting the Department of Veteran Affairs to be able to support our seniors once they're in their late stages and their mobility issues are present. It's some hard points by which to be able to break through. So if we can connect in order to make the accessory dwellings, real for inner city communities, I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely reach out to your office directly for that. And I just wanted to add one thing I forgot to mention a second ago, which is for the accessory dwelling units in the city, those would also include things inside the building. So if you convert a basement or an attic or things like that. So it does not have to be a freestanding structure, which is why we think it can work in all communities, not just those areas where folks have yards. But and I'm sorry, I think I interrupted Assemblymember Gallagher.
It's all right. I'm a big fan of the accessory dwelling units, and I'm on that bill. But I wanted to mention also that I think one of the things that would really help seniors, which is like the missing link of the last round of tenants' rights legislation, is good cause eviction. And I think that would actually help quite a lot of seniors stay in their homes. And I think that's something that we could still work on and pass. Another thing that I'm actively working on in District 50 is we have a lot of developments that got 421A tax breaks to build affordable housing, but a recent housing rights initiative study found that there was a great deal of fraud in what the rents are being charged in those that are meant to be affordable. So one of the things that my office is really focused on is creating mechanisms to investigate how many of these buildings are actually following the affordable housing laws that they were asked to follow when they got this tax break. And I think that, 421A is going to expire soon, and we really have to think about how can we restructure these benefits that we're giving developers so that either they're actually giving truly affordable housing, or that they're really supporting our vulnerable members of our community. And if they're not able to do that, we need to rethink the program altogether. So those are two of the things that I'm really thinking about in terms of housing and safety for seniors.
I wanted to mention, just quick mention something first, just to my colleague, Assemblymember Gallagher's point. She's right about that. The 421A tax abatement, there's a lot of people who buy the corner of like the lots in our neighborhood, and they take these incentives from the city and the state, and they promise affordable housing, and they turn around and give any affordable housing, okay? Or it's very minimal. Just recently, Kevin Parker, myself, and many elected officials, we just celebrated a newly developed 89-unit residence that was dedicated only to senior housing. We're very involved in that. It's called the Bishop, Phileas, and Hermelyn Senior Residence. We're very involved because we knew that if there's any development that's gonna happen, it should be seniors, okay? However, a percentage of the senior homes are allocated to homeless, which is good. 30 of the units are allocated to homeless. But then we found out there was a loophole with the developers. Okay, the developers right now own the property that this bishop owned for 15 years. And they are usurping the process and listing people from New Jersey to come in. So this is, again, to Emily's point, we as elected officials need to hold a lot of these developers accountable because they say they're coming in to do something and they turn around doing something different. I also just quickly wanted to point out that we did pass in the budget a $2.3 billion combined in federal state to pay back rent in 3 months of prospective rent, with funding available to help pay utilities and internet services. So I think the seniors should know that. Also, there was $100 million to help landlords become whole on unpaid rent from tenants who otherwise could pay rent, but simply refuse to do so. So I know there's a lot of landlords who are complaining and so forth, but there's funding for that. And I know a lot of seniors who own homes who need the extra income. They know that they can find ways to subsidize $540 million in federal funding to help homeowners, with $60 million set aside for foreclosure assistance. So again, a lot of seniors, they get in a situation where there's a reverse mortgage, people are knocking down their doors, and deed theft and a whole bunch of other stuff. So there's provisions that can help them, and then $480 million to directly assist with paying mortgages and utilities. So we have a number of legislation that have provided these services, also addressing the extension of tax lien sales and tax foreclosure. So I mentioned that since we're talking about affordability and housing, just a lot of our seniors are also homeowners or and small landlords, and that they should know that there's some services available to them.
Zach, one of the things that gets left out of this conversation around housing that we have to pay attention to, and myself and Senator Bichotte Hermelyn overlap, and Senator Persaud's district is right next to mine. Senator Latrice Walker's district overlaps. But I see this throughout Brooklyn, is we have a problem with workforce housing. And what I see in my community is that you have social workers married to transit workers who have no place to live, teachers married to nurses who have no place to live. And we really need to have some conversations about how do we create an AMI and a program for some of these people, many of which work for the city and can't afford to live in the city in which they very worked. They have people who are hospital workers who are sleeping in cars during the middle of the pandemic. It's outrageous. And we really need to focus on that and make that a major priority, as well as the notion as we look at our housing policy. Although we have to protect renters, we really need to have more of an emphasis on home ownership. In Black and Latino communities in particular, the vast majority of our wealth is tied up in our homes. And if we are, and as you heard Assemblywoman Bichotte Hermelyn refer to this, we need to do a better job at looking at like HPD and its programs and making sure that they are protecting people from third-party transfers, from deed theft, from reverse mortgages, and some of the other things that are going on in our community at an epidemic rate, but then simultaneously create options for people to own their own homes, which again, we talk about the American dream, is a fundamental part of it. And now in New York City, that home ownership may not be a white picket fence, right? But it may be a co-op, right? And so we have to look at all of the different options, and I think that's a major part of what we have to continue to talk about and push in terms of our agenda.
So we're starting to approach the final stretch of our conversation, and I think Senator Parker's remarks give me a good segue. Brooklyn, land of riches, is also land of inequality, and unfortunately to a significant extent. And I think that extends to a more abstract idea. Everyone knows Brooklyn is more fun than the other boroughs. Just don't tell your colleagues I said that. But it's a land of diversity, great food, many great parks, wonderful neighborhoods to hang out in. But seniors don't always have access to those things. I would like to note that seniors are a very diverse group. There's a lot of difference between a 60-year-old or 55-year-old who can join the AARP, a 75-year-old, a 100-year-old. But I do want to ask and devote a little bit of time to how can we, improve the quality of life for seniors, especially given, the mental health issues of the pandemic, isolation. Senator Gounardes, maybe you could start. I know that you focused a lot on like speed cameras. You've obviously kept an eye towards, quality of life issues. How do you think we can do better by seniors on that point?
Well, thank you, Zach. I think right now, there's a moment, an opportunity to get our senior centers reopened. I mean, we're looking at data, 67% of our seniors have been fully vaccinated in the city or had at least one shot, so they're on their way. getting vaccinated. I know many centers are trying to open or get ready to open, but they don't have the guidance or the guidelines from either the city or the state or both to tell them what they need to be doing in order to safely reopen, to then bring their senior communities back. That's one huge issue that I hear about time and time again. And as I was saying earlier, a lot of our seniors during the last year, they've been going through deep isolation. They have not been able to see their friends at centers. They have not been able to see their grandkids, their kids, their families. It's been really, really tough. Senior centers often are the only lifeline, the social lifeline that these individuals in our community have to kind of feel that they are still part of something. And so just last week, I and a few colleagues sent letters to the governor and the mayor, asking them to, now that we are at this point, we're not saying open up tomorrow, we're saying tell us what we need to be doing to safely reopen. At the same time, allow the senior centers to host outdoor events, to kind of bring people back in safe spaces, outdoor activities, things like that. That, I think, is just one small step that we can be doing right now to improve the quality of life of our seniors who have, just like everyone else has, faced a really difficult time over the last year. You mentioned, the speed cameras. Street safety, again, is a huge issue for seniors, being able to know that you can safely cross the street without fear of being hit by a speeding car. Unfortunately, when we talk about street safety, we tend to measure our statistics in terms of the number of people who are injured or killed, which is important to keep track of. But really, the deeper number we should be thinking about is how many near misses are there? How many times does someone almost get hit by a car speeding into a turn? How many times does a senior or a parent with a stroller have to jump back, from a curb trying to cross because some car is trying to beat the light? We really have to change this conversation around street safety. And just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now, I had a senior in my neighborhood in Bay Ridge killed by a car, someone who I actually knew, who used to come to all of our senior events, our senior picnics, our proms, our everything, and was killed by an SUV because the driver didn't see her there. So we really have to think about, both in the short term, what can we do to improve quality of life, but also in the long term, what are the systemic types of changes we need to give people the comfort to know that they can walk their streets freely without harm.
And I would like to thank welcome Assemblymember Robert Carroll to the conversation. Very busy, I'm sure, this morning. Glad to have you, Assemblymember. Senator Persaud, you had a comment?
Yeah, you mentioned the parks that we have. I have in my district, we have one of the largest state parks, the Shirley Chisholm State Park. And we have to look at now, this pandemic has shown us that the senior centers, we have to look at how we assess seniors in a different way. We're no longer dependent on the physical buildings that we were hosting the senior centers. We have to expand our thinking to make sure we're setting up programs for them on the outside. Because many of them, even though they've gotten their vaccines, they're still afraid of going back into a building. They're afraid of the unknown. So we have to look at all of the public spaces that we have out there, and how do we partner with the Parks Department more, with the libraries more, to use some of those spaces and create programs on the outside. Many of my seniors, they want to be back. They want to be in that congregate setting with their friends. Those are the only friends they have. And we're denying them that. There's so much of the unknown. We're talking about movie theaters being reopening. I think we should be talking about the senior centers being reopened. The movie theaters all well and good, but our seniors have done so much for our communities, and now we're leaving them on the back burner. It's about time that we step up and make sure that they are feeling comfortable and they are all well and good. So we need to partner more with the open spaces to bring the services to them.
Yeah, I just want to add too that these centers oftentimes are a first line of defense for folks that might need assistance, right? So they serve as organizations who do wellness checks, both sending people to knock on a door, but also if somebody comes in and it looks like they're not doing as well, they can connect them with services. So the social isolation part of this is very important, but it's also very important just to maintaining health long term.
If I can just chime in for 1 second. Maybe about 10 years ago, we used to take over 50 buses full of seniors to Sunken Meadow Park. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you remember what that looked like. And seniors would get on those buses and they would come up to Sunken Meadow Park. Yes, and we would feed them. We would give them steaks, chicken. We would treat them so wonderfully. That was their day out. That was the day where everybody congregated from every different district to be able to come together. And they were all seniors. And as young people, we were the ones serving them. So we had a robust amount of volunteers. I would urge my colleagues that we sit down, start a committee. Let's start that over. They need to start feeling normal again. And the only way we're going to do that, you know, I always say that everything comes in a full circle. Let's revisit that. Let's make our, you know, it's our responsibility as legislators to come together and ensure that our seniors are happy, that they have everything that they need to be able to survive. But let's be real, a lot of them are not going to want to go into an enclosed senior center yet because they're still in fear. So let's start getting together, maybe setting up a committee and making this happen. Maybe not as large this year, but we should start talking and coming together to make that happen, if you don't mind.
So we're running out of time, but I do want to give Assemblywoman Bichotte Hermelyn a very brief opportunity to kind of cap things off on this part of the conversation.
Yes, definitely. Just for the record, I agree with Assemblymember Maritza Davila. I did wanted to address long-term care. That's something that we haven't really talked about, but that's huge. Long-term care and Medicaid provision and AARP being your secondary insurance. I was extremely involved because my late mother, I took care of my late mother. So I noticed there were a lot of loopholes regarding long-term care. We need to reform long-term care. There are many cases where seniors have insurance. They are eligible for Medicaid. They have subsidies with AARP because Medicare doesn't pay for the full benefit. And yet doctors and hospitals are still denying seniors with long-term care who do have both insurance. So if they have Medicaid and Medicare, they would bill Medicare, they would try to bill AARP, but then if there's still a residual that's left, they would not bill Medicaid. So I think that's important. And the last thing is the consumer-directed personal assistant program. So part of having long-term care and Medicaid, you can get home health aides. And I think a lot of seniors, my mother was able to extend her life by 10 years because she had home health aid. She had someone around her who helped her, took care of her and so forth. And a lot of seniors, they do not have an advocate to take them through that, that complex process, which is why I'm supporting Godfrey's bill on renewal for Medicaid and long-term. They require you to renew it every year. That's too much for seniors. Every 2 years or maybe every 3 years. That's it. Thank you.
All right, we're getting to the final stretch, what I like to call the legislative challenge, because no one likes talking to legislators more than me. But we are running low on time, so I'm going to ask everybody to give one last point in maybe no more than 30 seconds. But the exception that proves the rule is going to be Assemblymember Robert Carroll, who's going to be, I would like to take a minute or two to just say, you know, as a prolific legislator himself, you know, what does he see coming up in the remaining weeks of session that can help seniors in Brooklyn?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Or good morning. Thank you so much, Zach. It's great to be here. You know, one thing selfishly that I would like to highlight is a bill I've had in the Assembly for 5 years now that would expand EPIC eligibility. You know, 300 or so thousand older New Yorkers are eligible for EPIC, which helps folks afford pharmaceuticals and medicine that they desperately need with copays. And unfortunately, sometimes folks become ineligible for EPIC because their pension may have increased or Social Security or other payments. Well, we've got a bill I've got a bill with Senator Jamal Bailey, who just passed in the Senate, to expand EPIC eligibility to make sure when those cost of living adjustments to pensions Social Security and other programs happen, you don't suddenly become ineligible for EPIC. And I think that's what we've got to do as we close out session over the next 2 months, is make common sense pieces of legislation that help New Yorkers, that make sure that it's easier to live in New York as we get out of this pandemic. And I think, you know, Assemblymember Davila and Senator Persaud were making really good points about how do we reopen society, right? We've been talking a lot about reopening schools. That's so important. I'm so worried about our children and trying to get our schools reopened in a smart way. But yeah, how do we reopen those senior centers? How do we reopen those great summer concerts that are in all our neighborhoods in Brooklyn, from my district in Prospect Park to out to Coney Island to Wingate? And those things make Brooklyn an amazing place. How do we make open streets make sense for folks? Because it's great on some blocks, some other blocks, maybe it doesn't work too well. I think together, we've got a big, diverse, smart borough, and we've got a ton of folks with different experiences and knowledge. And we need to bring everybody to the table to make sense so that our borough and our city and our state can reopen, and then to make sure stupid things like folks not being eligible for EPIC because they get a cost of living adjustment, you know, we right those kinds of wrongs. And I know that my colleagues in Brooklyn are laser focused on that, and that kind of common sense, practical work that we try to get done in Albany all the time. So that's what I hope for in the next 2 months.
All right, so we're going to up the ante on the legislative challenge. One quick thought from each of you of what lies ahead in the final weeks of session. Senator Gounardes, go.
Traffic safety.
Assemblymember Gallagher.
New York Health Act and elder parole.
Ooh, we're really moving now. Senator Persaud.
Kinship caregiver and raising the minimum that people could qualify for. Bill number S5574. Just remember that. It's great for seniors. S5574.
Oh, Brooklyn showing what it can do. Senator Parker.
Yes, the CCIA, the Climate Community and Investment Act, has to get done this year. And it's important for our seniors, because we know our seniors not just care about their lives, but the lives of their family and their children and grandchildren.
Assemblywoman Walker. Uh-oh, you're on mute.
I'm gonna take some of the time from my colleagues, but of course voting. As chair of the Assembly Election Law Committee, I want to let folk know that you have until June 15th to apply for an absentee ballot. Remember that election day is June 22nd, and that our early voting days are between June 12th and June 20th. So of course, you know, vote early, vote often, and we've made it very easy, 3 different ways to vote: by mail, in person, and early. God bless you.
Assemblymember Davila. Uh-oh, mute.
Food insecurity, the $50 million that came in, we want to make sure that it's spread out throughout the entire New York City. But food insecurity is still an issue in our communities.
Assemblymember Bichotte Hermelyn.
I'm going to agree with Assemblymember Gallagher. Healthcare for all. That's absolutely number one in housing affordability and security. Thank you.
And let's give the quick final word to Kevin Jones, Associate State Director of Advocacy at the AARP New York.
Great. Well, first, thank you to everyone who joined today. This was a really great conversation. Obviously, I already mentioned the ADU bill, which we hope everyone on this call will sign on to. Assemblymember Walker mentioned the price of prescription drugs. So we're very supportive of the ban on pay to delay, which delays bringing generic prescription drugs to the market, which raises the prices for a lot of customers. And we also hope everyone will sign on and support the secure choice legislation by Assemblymember Rodriguez and Senator Savino, which just improves the existing bill that was passed a couple of years ago by requiring employers to give this option, and it's an opt-out for employees for retirement savings, which we think will increase the quality of life for folks as they retire.
Thank you, Kevin. And now it's the moderator challenge. With the final minute, I just want to thank you all for making time in your very, very busy schedules to discuss such important issues affecting seniors in a place that would be one of the largest cities in the entire United States if it had stayed independent. So thank you all for that. In lieu of audience applause, I'll just give a little clap to everyone while shamelessly plugging our next events. Please join us next week for our next installment of our AARP Sponsor State Legislative Forum, focused on Queens on Tuesday, May 11th at 5:30 p.m. Registration is free and can be found on our website and in the chat. And then please join us next week as we honor the State Labor Power 100 list with keynote remarks from top legislators on Wednesday, May 12th. At 5 p.m. Registration, of course, is free and can be found on our website and in the chat. And then please join us on Tuesday, May 18th for our annual Digital New York webinar at 1 p.m. Is it free? It certainly is. Go to our website or in the chat to find out all the details. Thank you all so much. It's really a pleasure to talk about such important things that really matter to real people. Let's keep the conversation going. Again, I'm Zach Williams, staff writer at City and State. I'll catch you all next time.